And is still debated, and the question of Shaba Farms, where there Israel claims that it's actually Syrian territory and not Lebanese, and this should be discussed in the future according to a peace agreement between Israel and Syria.
Lebanon and Syria disagree with this interpretation. The result is a dangerous deadlock in which diplomacy is frozen and war often becomes a continuation of politics by other means. Hezbollah justifies its armed presence and resistance by citing Israeli occupation of Lebanese land. And Israeli forces regularly violate Lebanese sovereignty of its air, land, and sea. The mission of the UN peacekeepers along the Blue Line is an unenviable task. The border disputes keep tensions high.
The question of the Shaba Farms remain, and as we know, until now, it's been used as an issue. It hasn't been solved, and I suspect that it would take time before somebody reaches an agreement or a solution there.
Israel never concedes unless it is pressured, and unless it is paying a larger price than it already pays. No one can make it pay that price except the resistance.
With diplomacy seemingly stuck, tensions remain high across one of the most volatile front lines of the Arab-Israeli conflict.
You don't fight threats, you fight enemies.
Our core function remains the territorial defense of our populations and our member states.
Sanctions, do you think they will work?
A huge number of Western forces have not made huge progress.
The public no longer even believes that, we are there because we are building democracy.
Our empire is imploding. It itself is an illusion.
Empire with Marwan Bashar on Al Jazeera.
Home to a diversity of rare species, Latvia's pristine woodlands are a place of magic. But with a strained economy and an eager market, forests are rapidly perishing, and with them their inhabitants. People and Power investigates how 60% of Latvia's timber ends up on UK shelves with a questionable seal of approval. Latvia's pulp fiction, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Bringing energy to life. Rasgas, the power of the drop.
Personal blogs by professional journalists. blogs.aljazeera.net.
A popular uprising that shook the country to its core. A defiant president under siege from his people. As the protesters took charge of the streets, we look back at the events that are changing Egypt.
I will stay on the air if I can until the police come.
In a special program, Al Jazeera gives you a day-by-day account from those that witnessed them firsthand. Egypt burning, at this time on Al Jazeera.
We're not leaving, he is leaving. Pro-democracy protesters dig in for another night in Liberation Square. I'm Sahil Rahman. You're watching Al Jazeera's extended coverage of the ongoing turmoil in Egypt. Also on the programme, Hosni Mubarak's son Gamal and other leaders of the ruling party have resigned, but the president himself is staying put.
President Mubarak's continued leadership is critical.
Mixed signals from Washington as the man President Obama sent to Egypt says Mubarak should stay in power. The government says that's not US policy. The Egyptian government also denies an explosion at a gas pipeline in Sinai was caused by sabotage. And made in the USA, the technology allowing Egypt to spy on its internet users. Welcome to the programme. It's 2300 GMT, that's 1 o'clock in the morning in Egypt, where protesters are still camping out, not just in Cairo, but in streets and squares across the country, in a bid to oust Hosni Mubarak. But the Egyptian president is defiant. These are the latest developments because the Obama administration continues to insist upon an orderly and peaceful transition. But what the US wants for Mubarak himself is still not entirely clear. These are the latest developments. Frank Wisner, who went to Egypt last week, is Obama's special envoy, and he's backed his plan to stay in power until September. He said Mubarak's leadership was critical for both smooth transition, but a spokesperson for the US State Department insists that Wisner's comments do not speak for the government. Meanwhile, the top brass of Egypt's ruling National Democratic Party has resigned, according to state television. And party veteran Hossam Badrawi has taken over as the NDP's Secretary General. Our correspondent, who's very close to the square, these are live pictures from Cairo. We're not naming them for their own safety, joins me now on the line. Just bring us up to speed with the latest in terms of what's going on in the evening there in Liberation Square.
Well, Sahel, perhaps showing just how really unstable the situation remains. I suppose it was about 45 minutes ago when the gunshots were fired, very close to where I am, actually. It's coming from one of the buildings down by the barricade here, a big rush of people from the square. And I think some stones thrown and so on. It's generally quiet, but as I say, these sort of sporadic outbursts of clashes, these sort of running. I wouldn't say they're battles, but certainly it seems to be sort of supporters, pro-Mubarak supporters, occasionally coming close to the square and generating a lot of nervousness among those in the square. But it is. There are a lot less people here than there were last night. They have settled in and around the top of the square. There are tents, and people seem to be sort of camped out, really, really quite sort of dug in. There's a lot less military around. The checkpoints most of the checkpoints have opened up. So, as I say, it is calmer, but then again, there are these sort of sporadic moments of either gunfire or sort of excitement, if you like, in the square.
And it's been a very busy day as well, not just in terms of security, but also in terms of demonstrations and the politics of what's been going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that today's been certainly the most significant day in terms of politics. These resignations of the NDP leadership, which are largely being seen as attempts at concessions. But you know, the fact remains the same that the members that have, the people that have been replaced, the people that have taken the places of those that have gone, still remain very unpopular with the protesters, and they're sticking to their demands and saying, you know, they still want Mubarak gone, they still want Parliament dissolved. They still want these constitutional changes, and they will stick to their guns.
So, of course, they obviously are very entrenched in their positions, and the mood in the square itself, how would you describe that? It was very party-like, one might say, earlier in the day.
Yes, I think, as I say, they're standing firm. It's quieter today. It was very. There was a great atmosphere last night. The rain didn't help matters today, but as I say, they've set up these tents. There's food being shared and music being played. I think what's quite interesting, though, is that the mood in the square doesn't necessarily reflect the mood of wider Cairo. Out on the streets and walking in some of the neighbourhoods across the river, certainly, people seem just increasingly frustrated, really, that, you know, that they want to go back to work. They do want the banks open. The schools still remain closed. Today was by far the most normal day we've had since the crisis began. But there is this feeling, well, you know, I think you've done enough now, certainly.